We're just going live.
Hi guys, and welcome to the Gin and Tonic Show. I'm your host Moose, and this is my producer Nick. Our main discussion is about Islam in the 21st century. However, we will critique other religions and ideologies. We condemn any form of discrimination, violence, misogyny, slavery. We do, however, embrace many perspectives and free speech if it is factual and correct, and not based on any hate. Throughout the show, we will be exploring different religious beliefs, practices, and their impact on society, ranging from politics, interpersonal relationships, and mental health of believers and non-believers. We hope to create an open dialogue for those who feel they're not heard, especially those who have doubts and have left their belief systems. If you are interested in exploring the complex topic of religion and wish to be part of an honest and open dialogue, this is the show for you. We also welcome feedback and discussion from our audience and listeners. The Gin and Tonic Show is a free speech platform where you can express your ideas without any fear of violence and repercussions or any consequences. Please do join our discussion in the live chat as well as the comments. Thank you for stopping by and enjoy the Gin and Tonic Show.
Good evening and welcome to the Gin and Tonic Show. I'm your host, Moose. I am currently joined by a shaitan and a jinn at this moment. Greetings, dear immortal demonic beings. How are you both today?
Oh, I'm very good, and I'm here to make your life complicated.
Yes, so he is a very well-mannered, very well-cultured jinni who will actually come into your dreams and tell you, no, your thoughts should not be black and white. Everything is complicated.
Exactly. I bring the complications.
Yes, and now I'm also joined by the devil worshipper, Satan. Not Satan, not Shaitan, but Satan.
Yeah, that's my dyslexia acting up. But this is also like I didn't want to get some plagiarism issues from the satanic temple here.
Fair enough.
That's understandable.
Fair enough. So I know you're using their symbol, the Satanic Temple symbol, and also, it's okay. We can have a dyslexic Satan. We are more than happy to have you, dyslexic Satan. So we are also, hello, Dudabides. We are discussing this topic of the Muta marriage. So I know Ginny and I, last time when we were covering, and as well as like Satan and I were covering this topic, of religious scams, that is, and we were just going through the different scams, and what we found was that the Muta, we left out the Muta marriage, as like there's different, it's a different fronts for a scam. It can be even used as, it's a very complex topic, like Ginny would say. It's Ginny's favorite word, and I've started to say it too. It's a complex topic. But before we proceed, we need to define what a Muta is. There's a lot of confusion as to what a Muta marriage is, because there's something called a nikah, and then there's something called
It's
a Muta.
actually Muta is just a shortening of the expression Nikah Mutati, which is the
Right.
marriage of the
Yes.
pleasure.
The marriage of the pleasure.
Because Muta is literally pleasure in Arabic.
Yes.
You also see the same root in the word astamtio. I'm taking relishment, or I'm taking pleasure in something.
And that I actually I did not know with the what do you call it, like muta being itself the word pleasure, and I think even the exact translation in English would then end up being a pleasure marriage. So
yes,
there is what do you call it, I did want to see from islam.org. It's a website that discusses topics like Islamic topics, that is. And so again, I did not want to use some what do you call it, anti-Islamic topic Islamic website to define it. No, I'm going to use it straight from the horse's mouth. I hope you guys can see this. So this one is like Ginny said, Arabic dictionaries define muta as enjoyment, pleasure, and delight. And this is a topic about 4 pillars of muta. The root word mt signifies to carry away, to take away. So
yes,
okay.
It's kind of like it. It's probably its primary meaning, because this is one of those roots that have 2 meanings, and it's very dependent upon what form you use. One is about carrying away, to take away. That is why, for example, the word mata, which is object or belonging, is also using this root. And mata, it means to take away, which is the most basic form. So it's the basic meaning of the thing. But the thing is that some roots have several meanings. The other meaning is connected to to take to pleasure and enjoyment. So for example, the 5th form tamata is to be blessed by the enjoyment of something, to take pleasure from something.
So it's called tamata.
Tamata is the verb,
right?
But another verb is mata, which is to move or take away something, and istamta is to relish in something, which is a 3rd verb. Right. So you have, I mean, it's also and also amta, which is to give someone the use of something. So you do have roots can have several. Sometimes roots have more than just a singular meaning, and sometimes this is one of those roots that does have more than one meaning. So he isn't wrong when he says this, but it's also the meaning. The fundamental meaning is both pleasure and to carry away, to take away things.
Yes. So this is very fascinating, like the different root words, the different pronunciations, and how
it's the same pronunciation, and it's the same root. It's just that it has 2 semantic meanings that is used differently in different forms.
Okay.
It's kind of like, and you have to just memorize which form derives from which meaning. This is one of those harder roots. Just to though there are a lot of other roots that are like this, but sometimes you just have to memorize what the root meaning is for a specific form when a root has several meanings.
Yes. And also, so back to the marriage itself. So in definition, a marriage of muta is a marriage which the contract stipulates will last for a fixed period of time. So essentially, the permanent marriage, it's different from a permanent marriage. This is a very temporary marriage, or for a fixed period of
Which
time.
is, I think the temporary marriage is the muta, but then you have the permanent one, which is the nikah, if I got the term right.
No, nikah is also just marriage. It's just that you usually say nikah al-mutta,
But what
which
is what
you
is
add.
Because I heard that the only
Yes.
way, because like I heard that the muta was only recognized by Shia schools, whereas
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
Yes, it is
yes,
recognized
yes.
because of the it
It's
used to be,
only
I think.
recognized by yes, and it used to be recognized by
Used to
certain
be.
traditions, but in Sunni Islam it became banned because they took one hadith and interpreted it as Muhammad having forbidden it.
Yes,
Or
and
it was one of the caliphs that forbid it. I'm not entirely sure.
I recall the hadith. I'm not sure if it's Sahih or Hassan. I do remember it. I do remember. I'd have to find
Anyway,
it.
it's a Shia practice.
Yeah.
It's mostly or it's a Shia practice, and probably I don't know how it is in Ibad Islam, but I would imagine that they
Mhm.
also allow it, but I'm not certain.
Yeah. So
yeah.
predominantly,
Funny
it's a
story about this. The reason why I know this, or at least as where it's used,
yeah.
is I think it's more designed for concubines and such, because I know my one of my friends who happened to be in sex work during college. She was basically saying there were Arab men that would come in and basically be ask her to say a certain like verse or whatnot, or some kind of like Arabic sentence before they actually started their hour and a half session or whatnot. And it turns out they were just doing a muta marriage briefly before they did this kind of like
That is
act.
interesting. That is interesting. Very
I
She
mean,
interesting.
basically had,
all right.
Yeah.
oh,
Wait.
you were
What?
Sorry,
saying something?
Ginny. Yeah. Sorry, I
uh,
cut you off. I just found this very
yeah.
bizarre and interesting.
This actually touches upon something that I plan to speak about here later during this talk here,
Ah,
but about the origins of this concept.
Okay.
But
But
we
yeah,
might take that
let's
later.
also let's cover the definitions specifically. So, oh, by the way, Ginny, I wanted to ask you if this is called nikah al muta, what is the permanent marriage called?
It's usually just referred to a nikah without, or you know or they use some sort of version of so like sewage or something like that.
Hmm. Yeah, I heard there was a full version too, but again, my memory
Well,
escaped.
I mean, but it just means marriage, normal marriage.
Yeah.
I mean, legal marriage is assumed to be the normal type of marriage, and
Mm,
mutta is like more of a more defined definition of it.
yes. Yes. Okay. So
So
now,
you either just use a nikah, sewage, or some sort of other term for it.
yeah. Now back to the definition from alislam.org. By the way, this is a great
Do
website for.
do do, do nikah and that word for marriage has actually changed a bit in modern Arabic and means something else than it does in classical Arabic.
Oh, really?
Yeah, in classical it has to do with marriage, and you see the same term actually used in other Semitic languages for marriage.
Mm.
But it has become kind of like a term just that means something more carnal, shall we say. So it has kind of been used as a swear word sometimes.
Oh no! Oh no! And I think that's what I think Judah Biden.
But
He
if
was
you
probably referring to that.
yeah, but that's the modern invention. If you look at it in older, medieval text, then it's just used for marriage generally.
Oh, I think yeah, and you are allowed to seek out wives with your wealth and decorous conduct, but not in fornication. But give them the reward for what you have enjoyed them in keeping your promise. And I think this is 424, the verse which they're also Shia Muslims use this as to justification for muta as well too. So muta marriage is referred to both on hadith literature and in much more detail in books of jurisprudence, fiqh. So there's more detail in jurisprudence, that is. In hadith and in other sayings related from early Muslims, the word muta is usually employed. The Shia hold that this particular term is the preferred name for temporary marriage because the Quran itself refers to this kind of marriage, employing a term derived from the same root. The following verse, the word istimta, the 10th verbal form for empty, is translated as enjoy. So those of
that was what I translated is to relish something or to pleasure
so those
from
of
something.
them,
But yeah, it's enjoy.
Yeah, so those of them, women, whom you enjoy, give them their appointed wages. So, and 424 also like talks about right hand possessions. And a lot of Shia scholars don't interpret right hand possession as sex slaves. A majority of them actually. In contrast to Sunni interpretation. The Shia interpretation for right hand possession is the muta marriage. So this is where the little difference comes in, like the differences start to come in interpretation of the verse itself too. Now I feel like right hand possession it was the term for slavery, but I think it is just a different interpretation. In general, the word muta was more commonly used than other terms for temporary marriage, but during the lifetime of the Prophet and afterwards during the time of the Shia imams and other Muslim leaders. Both its proponents and opponents preferred this word and its derivatives. In Wasail al-Shia, the comprehensive and definite reference work for Shia hadith concerning all branches of jurisprudence, the word muta is employed in the headings of all sections on temporary marriage. In books of jurisprudence, in terms of muta, al-nikah al-munqati, discontinued marriage, and al-nikah al-muwaqqat, temporary marriage, are all employed. Al-Muhaqqiq al-Hilli still employs the term discontinued marriage in his writings, and hence his commentators use the same expression, although in sections of the statutes relating to this kind of marriage. And they also employ the terms istimta and related to the word tamatu.
That was that was the other word I described before.
Yeah, so
is the word for.
Yeah,
and tamatu is the master of that.
Yeah, al-Shahid al-Thani employs the same term as al-Hilli, but others such as al-Shahid al-Awwal, al-Allama al-Hilli, and al-Sheikh al-Ansari preferred the term muta. Like these are Shia scholars, that is the works of Shia scholars. So among Sunni jurisprudence, there is a discussion concerning whether or not the marriage of muta is the same as temporary marriage. Most of them have agreed that they are synonymous. In some works, a special term is applied to women who participate in muta mustajra, or rented woman. Interesting. This is sounding, we're getting dark here. Muta is considered a kind of rental because in general, a man's basic aim in kind of marriage is the sexual enjoyment of a woman. And in return for his enjoyment, the woman receives a certain amount of money or property. This is kind of like, how different is this from prostitution, How that different is this? I think, yes, Sunnis think it was abrogated. I'm not 100% sure.
Yes, she isn't wrong.
Okay.
That's also my impression of it. From
Okay. So you feel that I may be wrong because I remember there was a hadith against muta marriage for sure.
I mentioned it. I said that there was some hadith. Either it was citing Muhammad or it was citing one of the caliphs.
One of the caliphs who heard Muhammad say, kind of like that.
Yeah.
So in defining rental, the jurisprudence say it is to gain possession of a benefit in exchange for a specified sum. Oh boy. This definition applies equally to temporary marriage. In this connection, a number of hadiths have been recorded in which the word mustajira is employed. Shia jurisprudence discusses temporary marriage with all the care it bestows upon permanent marriage. Like permanent marriage, Muta has pillars and statutes. To the two pillars of permanent marriage, the formula and the persons are added to the time period and the dower. So they discuss like the formula. There's the persons, the time period, and actually let's read into it because again we kind of I kind of see that this is a lot of it is misused or sometimes like misapplied from time to time. So we kind of want to get our definitions like in order to see like what the actual rulings are in the jurisprudence, because sometimes I and Ginny and I we've had and Nick as well, like we've seen like it applied so poorly sometimes. So the formula, since it is a contract, muta requires a declaration and an acceptance. As in a permanent marriage, the declaration is the prerequisite of the woman. It must consist of one of the three Arabic formulas, the same three which are employed by the Shia in permanent marriage. Al-Sayyid al-Murtaza is said to have added that a slave girl may employ the formula, which is I have allowed you, bahtaku, or I have considered you lawful. But his words have not been confirmed by others. Al-Shahid al-Thani writes, to me it seems more correct to limit ourselves to the first three phrases. So you have to say certain phrases, that is. Apparently there's no disagreement on the point that the woman may not employ expressions like I have given you possession, I have given to you as a gift, I have rented to you, I have lent to you. The acceptance is made by the man after the woman has made her declaration. So I think this is where Nick was saying something about like she has to recite something in Arabic. So it could have been I have given you possession, and then the acceptance is made by the man after the woman has made her declaration. His words must demonstrate that he is satisfied with the declaration. For example, he may say, I will accept the marriage, or I accept the muta. If he should say only I accept or I am satisfied, the contract is still valid. Wow, this is like reading some like legal documents. I love this. So, that the declaration should precede the acceptance is not a condition of that. So declaration should precede the acceptance. So it doesn't have to be before the acceptance. Since a contract consists of a declaration and an acceptance, in whatever order the two may occur. And it is claimed that there is a consensus on this point. So it doesn't have to be, the woman doesn't necessarily have to say the phrase first, but it just has to be in whatever order you like. Al-Muhaqqiq al-Hilli states explicitly that if the man says, I have married you, and then the woman says the same thing to him, the contract is sound. Which is interesting. So if a man says, I have married you, and the woman says the same thing, I have married you, the contract is sound. According to Al-Allama al-Hilli, the formula of the contract must be recited in the perfect tense. But the majority of the ulama hold that it is permissible for it to be recited in the imperfect tense as long as there is the intention of contracting the marriage. So a majority of the scholars do say intention matters more rather than reciting it perfect. And I think they're also assuming because not everybody's going to be like an Arabic speaker, for example. So this is where it is permissible. Many hadiths have been related showing that the imperfect tense is acceptable. And for example, the Imam Jafar al-Sadiq, by the way, Jafar al-Sadiq is the sixth Imam amongst the Shia Muslims. And he is the, Hussein was the grandson. Sorry, I'm just great.
He's also the one that...
Great grandson. Muhammad's great. Yes, you were saying?
He is also the one that taught both Imam Hanafi and Maliki.
Yes, Imam Hanafi and Maliki are his students, and
Yeah.
Jafar al-Sadiq is also known as the father of Sharia. And ironically speaking, the Shia Sharia, or Jafari, is
Yeah,
the
yes.
first jurisprudence that emerges.
Yes, and the Sunni schools are more or less descendants of him.
Yes. It's
Yes.
the irony, because normally you believe that, wait, we think Shia Islam split. No, but then the evidence shows that the Shia Islam has an established ruling system already preceding the Sunni schools of thought. So this kind of challenges that view. And that in itself is an interesting discussion on its own, by the way. So, like, we'll read this example anyway. For example, Imam Jafar al-Sadiq once asked what formula should be recited when Muta is contracted. And he replied, I marry thee in Muta according to the book of God and his prophet Sunnah, without inheritance from me to thee, or vice versa, for so many days and for so many dirhams. And again, they mentioned the currency here, dirhams. I think dinar can be mentioned too, technically. It depends. The legal discussion of the contracts assert that the persons who make the declaration and acceptance must be worthy of the contract, ahl al-aqd. In the question of the muta, this means that those who conclude the contract must be the man and woman themselves or their representatives. Waqil. By the way, waqil is also another name for lawyer in Pakistan, Urdu as well too. Or
I actually wanted to ask this question too, but Dee beat me to it. But
yeah,
are there witnesses that must be present for this contract?
this is interesting because we're looking at the conditions, right?
Yeah.
It can be between themselves or the representatives or their fathers, both the girl and the man. Hence, for example, it is permissible for the father to say, I give my daughter in muta with her agreement. If anyone other than the above person should conclude the contract, it is uncommissioned or fuduli and therefore invalid. So the mother cannot do this, but the father can, or a waqil. So, now the person status. This is another condition. A man can conclude a contract of a muta only with a Muslim or one of the people of the book. I wonder if the worker, the sex worker that you were mentioning, Nick, was amongst the people of the book. And yes, I think let's get into it because that's why I'm reading all the conditions, because I want to see if there's any witnesses to this as well too. Okay, let's cut to the chase. It's prostituted. Is this another type of marriage where boyfriend will want to spend the night or just for the it can also be a boyfriend girlfriend type of deal too, by the way.
Yeah.
Or not necessarily even for a short term too, because a lot of times with amongst the Shia community, this is used as girlfriend boyfriend situation, but it's also been used as a premarital thing too. So before marriage. So it depends. Like
It is.
yeah.
Maybe we should continue a bit, but I want to really speak about the background behind this because it's fascinating.
Yeah. And after, yeah, so like we're finished the conditions of this. So the Muslim woman, I wonder if the sex worker, by the way, was a people of the book. It is not permissible to engage in a temporary marriage with an unbeliever or an enemy of the household of the Prophet, Ahl al-Bayt, that is the Imams, such as a follower of the Kharij, which means, I'm guessing Kharij would be Ibadi. So I don't think the Ibadi would be permissible. A Muslim woman cannot marry a Muslim man. And I'm also feeling that this may not necessarily be permissible between Sunni and Shia in some cases, which it gets very muddy if you think of it, because when you say enemy of the household of the Prophet or Ahl al-Bayt, there are many Sunni like individuals who are technically, would be against persons like Ali, for example. So
Debo Drew asks, isn't a woman ruined though? who would marry here. That's probably a concern in most contexts.
Yes.
But I also imagine that these things also were a bit different from different times in the Middle East. So I can also actually imagine it during the early period of the Middle Ages, where actually this was a way for people that weren't properly permanently married but wanted to have some sort of intercourse to do it within the rules.
Yes. So I think this is where I feel my speculation also comes in, with probably Islamic Shia scholars probably endorsed this because they saw that, okay, there's a lot of zina, there's a lot of adultery. Let's come up with this way. That way, like, we don't have to punish a shit ton of people.
Your
Because
Honor,
there's
hearsay, speculation.
But
Yeah.
there's also the fact that in certain ways, in most ways not, but in certain ways, the medieval period of the
yes,
Middle East, the early medieval period, I'm talking about the first centuries of Islam and,
yeah.
around that area. It was also a very different society from modern, from the modern Middle East and Arab world
Yes.
in many regards. I can see, considering how open they were in certain aspects of sexuality, that as long as it was done within the rules like this, people didn't care.
Yeah, and I think this is where they came up with the caveat because, of course, they wanted to be open, but they also want to kind of stay within the rules of Islamic jurisprudence. So this came up as like it's sort of like a middle ground of sorts.
I mean, you have to remember also that the reason why things like these happen within contracts, such as these marriages, is these temporary marriages and the like, is that you do not want to end up with children
Yeah,
out of wedlock where no one is responsible, because you still, if a marriage like this actually results in a child, you're still responsible for the child,
yes,
both parents. So you also have
Because
what I've seen is that you actually have periods between as well,
yes.
and you have
Also,
discussions in order to identify who is the father by looking at eye color and traits on the face and such,
mm,
if they are similar and such. So you do have traditions here that you do not just simply get away from responsibility. And it's important because this is part of greater social stability. You have to remember that people that are children inherit
yes,
the
I
earth that you
actually
want
have
plowed for generations. and
yeah,
don't.
and people also forget that thing about agricultural societies. One of the reasons as to why they demand such stability in inheritance and such is that it takes actually generations to make farmland usable in a good way. It
mm,
doesn't just get usable in a couple of years when you have used it, but it gets easier and better to use the more years you have planted and done cycles on it, which means
yes,
that it is something that you inherit that is actually very hard to get get into good form quickly if you have not inherited and learned the skills to use it, and also inherit a piece of earth that has been worked
yes,
upon before.
yes. Also, by the way, back to the conditions of the marriage, that is the person's. Here's another condition: a Muslim woman cannot marry a non-Muslim. This is kind of the most obvious rule. If the man has a free, permanent wife, he cannot contract a muta with a slave without his wife's permission. Again, it's only permitted if the wife allows a muta with a slave. However, if he doesn't have again, this has to be a free wife. It doesn't have to be a slave wife. Sometimes there's a slave wife as well too. Should he do so, the contract is like without his wife, without the permission. Should he do so without her permission, the contract is invalid or in abeyance pending her permission. If the slave should belong to someone else, a muta cannot be contracted without her master's permission. Several hadiths have been recorded on this point. For example, the Imam Jafar says there is nothing wrong with marrying a slave temporarily with the permission of her master. God damn, some next level pimping. A man is not permitted to marry the daughter of his sister in law or brother in law without his wife's permission.
Isn't that just a niece?
I
Or
know, right? Marry the daughter of his sister in law. Yeah, that's his niece, pretty much. Oh dear, oh dear. So, but it has to be his wife's permission. And
Well,
this
I
is a
thought I
so if you want to
literally
bang your
thought
nephews
that
and nieces, you want to bang your niece, you have to have your wife's permission if you want to bang your niece.
I legitimately thought my dyslexia was acting up. I'm like, isn't the daughter of my brother-in-law's son is my nephew, so
Yeah,
it's
yeah, it is. It is. It is. I know. I'm the more evil one here. It's ironic that the shaitan and the jinn are the.
But one thing I would like to say is marriage in the families is commonly or is a
Yes,
very
it's a
common
common
practice,
practice.
especially in places like Pakistan and India,
Yes,
right?
yes. In
I
Pakistan
mean,
and India,
this
it's very
this isn't that. I mean,
yeah,
it's just as long as you do not marry on your direct links, like your
like
father,
sibling,
your mother, and or your
sibling.
siblings, then
Yeah,
it's mostly actually not that bad,
yeah, like
unless it's
there's
done repeatedly.
yeah.
And
Um,
that's the issue usually when it comes to incest.
yes, and now should a contract be concluded without her permission, without the wife's permission, by the way, it is invalid or in abeyance until she gives her permission. If she doesn't give her permission, the contract is not valid. With these two exceptions, the relatives to whom marriage is not permitted are the same as in permanent marriage. Like in Islamic law, like the nikah law, same laws apply. It is recommended that a Muslim man conclude a temporary marriage only with the chaste Muslim woman. Yo, the sex worker doesn't the sex worker's clients you just applied, like that's not a chaste Muslim woman. What are how are they even applying those rules? Oh my goodness. Hereby chaste,
Oh,
Afifa.
and Drastic has a message for me. Yay, yeah.
I'm glad Nick
That's
has
also
updated his name to the icon from Dennis Prager to less evil Satan. Absolutely. This should be your permanent logo or your icon at this
yeah.
point. And yeah, like it's definitely by the way, yeah, I love this icon. Um so yeah, it's very weird that there's also like the chastity is also a condition, weirdly. Here by chaste, the classical scholars have in
Well,
mind
they're
someone who
following
has
the words of the prophet Jesus,
damn it,
who
boy.
says, "Thou shalt cast the whoever who cast the first stone, cast if you have no sins or whatever the hell
Yeah.
that is." Right?
Okay.
These guys are at a hooker's house, and so I think
Yeah.
like when they're like sharing slaves or whatnot, like this kind of goes out the window because they
Yeah,
can't
I
really.
think it's like yeah, when they're sex slaves and stuff, yeah, that stuff all goes out of the window. Here by chaste, the classical scholars or authors have in mind someone who has never committed fornication. I don't know if this applies to a slave. Fornication and who follows the Sharia in her activities. More specifically, the adjective denotes a woman who has observed the Sharia laws concerning marriage and in general is honest and upright. So this usually applies like it is recommended. By the way, this is only a recommendation, not necessarily a requirement. It is a recommended that your temporary marriage partner should be someone who has never committed fornication. Again, it's not a requirement, just a recommendation. Big difference. You have to read between the lines. And I think it's definitely for those who do want to kind of experience this. So definitely, like this is something that's an option. The two attributes, Muslim and chaste, are derived from the sayings by two Imams, the Imam al-Rada was asked, "Is it possible for a man to conclude a temporary marriage with a Jew or Christian?" He answered, "I would prefer that he engage in muta with a free Muslim woman." Again, condition, free Muslim woman. The chastity only applies to the free Muslim woman. To the question about performing muta, Imam Jafar replied, "It is permissible to marry none but a chaste woman, for God says, and those who guard their private parts." Chapter 23, verse 5. Hence, you should not put your private parts where you do not feel safe with your dirhams. Where you do not feel safe with. What the hell? Where the hell did the dirhams come from?
I think they're talking about like a chastity belt.
You do not feel safe with your dirhams. I would be more concerned with STDs, yo. Like he's concerned with dirhams, with money. Anyway, if someone
I actually don't think it's. I mean, I think it's more like he's saying that you shouldn't, have sex with someone that you do not trust. That you wouldn't trust with your money.
Yeah,
I think it's more like that.
true. I think that
So,
should be the
so I mean, it's usually. I mean, that's how I would interpret it.
right, yeah. No, and that's an interpretation of its own too. So that sounds a little more reasonable. You know what I mean? Sounds a little more. Yeah.
Al-Uzza Akbar has a question for you, Moose.
Wait. Allah Al-Uzza Akbar. Oh dear. The worshipper of Al-Uzza. Do condoms count as dirhams? I don't know.
We aren't Google even to answer that one.
Yeah, we don't know.
That's
I'm not an expert on this.
Moose,
Next.
I thought you were the expert.
Yeah, I am. I am a legal expert. I'm not a financial expert. Okay. Anyway, what's a bank account and let's have in common? You lose interest once you throw. Damn it! Enough with these naughty comments. Naughty.
You are giving the Islamists fuel for fire, considering that you are displaying a huge amount of degeneracy right now.
No, I'm being naughty. I'm trying to maintain some level of intellectual, what do you call it? Mannerisms and being more cultural, like Jinni. Anyway, if someone makes an accusation against a woman, it is recommended that before concluding the contract of the muta with the man inquire from her about the situation. That is, as to whether or not she has a husband or whether or not she is chaste. But asking is not a condition of the contract, so you don't have to ask. According to the principles of jurisprudence, the principle of correctness as applied to the acts of a Muslim demands that one consider the act of a woman who has declared herself ready to enter into muta as correct. So even if she's willing to enter the muta as, I think that's how I'm interpreting it. Like if she's willing, to enter into muta, which it already shows that she is willing, she is like of someone trustworthy, or she is chaste, or she does not have a husband. So you kind of have to believe her in this situation. But it is recommended to ask her about whether she has a husband, whether or not she has been chaste. Like it's better to ask before. So again, these are recommendations. According to this principle, whenever we are in doubt concerning the correctness of the act of a Muslim, we preserve the social and legal order by judging that his act was correct. For example, if we are in doubt concerning the legality of a couple's marriage, we judge that it was legal. Otherwise, we would also have doubt about the legitimacy of their children, the application of the laws of inheritance, etc. So I think this is where they would face some problems about like laws of inheritance and stuff. So they have to assume that the legality of the marriage is, Like, I think that's where the assuming that it is legal. In a different area of law, the canonical prayer provides a good example. If after the finishing the prayer, person doubts whether or not he said the correct number of cycles, he assumes this number was correct. Otherwise, he would spend a good deal of his time repeating acts of worship that he's already performed. The slightest doubt will be insufficient for him to cause the repeat of the same act. And this has happened where as a Muslim, and I used to do this, like I used to think, wait, did I do 3 rakats or 2 rakats or 4 rakats in my Maghrib prayer? And
Or the
this
typical question: how many rakats are in wudu?
boy, there's no rakats in wudu.
I know, but that's the question they ask.
Yeah, that's the question. Is how many rakats are in the wudu, just to see if there's a person's an actual what do you call it?
I was just
Uh,
confused why you were talking about the ablution, or the washing, and then you mentioned the bending. I was what?
no, 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 no. I was nearly gonna threaten the shaitan that I will whip him with a stick, with the holy Zamzam water stick, that I have in my hand, because I need to double dip it in holy and Zamzam water, because I'm surrounded by a jinn and a shaitan right now. All right. Um, on the basis, okay, so yeah, on the basis of this principle, one must dismiss the possibility that a potential wife might be a Chaz, so it is unnecessary to ask her. Interesting. This is very interesting. So it is unnecessary to ask her whether several hadiths are related which demonstrate the reprehensibility of asking about this woman's situation after the contract has been concluded. So it's best to ask before the contract rather than after, you know? So whether she has whether she was a virgin, not a virgin, you got to ask this before. You've done it, you got to do it. For example, a man once said to the Imam Jafar, I married a woman temporarily. Then it came to my mind that she might already have a husband. I investigated my matter and found out that it was so. The Imam said, why did you investigate? So it is it's what do you call it? So this is a very interesting caveat. Very interesting. Like, even if she's married and she's already done the muta, you're not allowed to investigate. Interesting. Or it's recommended not to do so. It is reprehensible for a man to conclude a marriage of muta with a fornicatress by reason of Quranic verses. Yo, Nick, you're literally your friend's clients are doing this with a fornicatress. What the hell? They're not even applying the laws. All right. This says the fornicator shall marry not a fornicatress or an idolatress. It's funny how they're both put in the same category. What the hell? And the fornicatress, none shall marry her but a fornicator or an idolater, and that is forbidden to the believers. But what if the fornicator or Muslim?
I find this quite insulting.
Yeah,
They're basically
because
saying all idolaters are basically whores.
yeah, because assuming, like, for example, followers of Hinduism, what if they're virgin and you're
I
equating them to
wonder what
fornicate?
they'll say. I wonder if they'll what. So do you know about the Devadasis in Bengal?
I actually don't. What was the case of
So
the?
they're the Hindu equivalent of nuns, to a point where in both the
Hmm.
British and so they're basically servants of God. Dev meaning God and Dasi meaning servants, right?
Yeah.
And they were basically supposed to be pious and married to God themselves as they serviced, but it got to a point where they were turned into brothels by the Islamic invaders.
Jeez.
With this main aspect.
Right. Right. Like, if this is applied, that is, yeah.
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 I
Damn.
mean, but it actually did happen where they had to like remove the act of Devadasis with the British rule just because of how sexualized and brothelized those temples became.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh man, that is fucked up. If a man should contract a temporary marriage with a fornicatress, it
When
is his
Musa
duty.
Drastic has a message for you.
Jeez, oh dear. How many Salafis does it take? Drastic? Drastic, calm down.
And
Calm
then
down.
the next, here's the
They
answer.
want to screw it in, want to tell you Muslim invented that, and they want to tell you electromagnetism was invented in the. Damn it! Calm down, Drastic. Calm down. Calm down, Drastic. All right. I'm also gonna give Drastic the holy stick too. So it's not just limited to like myself, Jinni, and Shaitan. We're also gonna give everybody a beating with the holy stick. Um, if a man should contract a temporary marriage with a fornicatress, it is his duty to command her not to perform adultery. But this is not a necessary condition of the marriage by reason of the principle of correctness as applied to the Muslim's act. Interesting. So, wait. It is your duty to tell her, hey, don't fuck around while we're temporarily married. But it is not a necessary condition. Like, you don't, it's a duty. Oh, like, you don't, like, I'm confused. Is her committing adultery not a necessary condition? Or is it the him saying, telling her not to perform? I'm a bit confused here. But my brain's like going all over the place. This is getting weirder and weirder.
I mean, it's rather it's okay to actually do a temporary marriage with a fornicatress, but you're
Mhm.
obliged to actually say that what you did before this marriage was not okay.
Right. But it's not a condition for you to say, but it's rather a duty, but not a condition.
Yes.
Interesting. It is
I
also
mean,
yeah, go ahead, Ginny. Sorry.
it's also the fact that I do not feel. I mean, if you did have, for example, intercourse within the Muta agreement, then you aren't a fornicatress or a fornicator because that's actually allowed.
Ah,
Just to clarify this.
yeah. Okay. Also, it is reprehensible without any exceptions to contract a temporary marriage with a virgin. Very interesting. First they said chaste woman, but they didn't say
Yes, because Afifa means someone that hasn't done illegal or things that border on illegal sexual acts, like being kissing an person you aren't married to or something like that.
Interesting.
You can be chaste and have been married before, but then divorced and still be
Hmm.
chaste because
Okay.
you haven't actually done anything against Islamic, proper Islamic behavior.
This is getting very confusing. It is also
Yeah.
represented. Like, let me read it again. It is
I thought I should have mentioned it before, but I didn't get the opportunity to do it,
yeah,
and then
no
I just
worries.
forget about
No
it.
worries. No worries. Yeah. No, I'm just going to read it again. It is
Forgot
also
about it.
reprehensible, without any exceptions, to contract a temporary marriage with a virgin by reason of the words of Imam Jafar, who says it is reprehensible because it is a stain upon her family. If a contract should nevertheless be concluded, it is not permissible for the man to consummate the marriage unless the marriage took place with the permission of her father, a condition almost impossible to imagine in a Muslim society. I mean, it could be possible. It's not necessarily entirely impossible. And
It's
Imam
kind
Muta,
of like this. Many things in the Arabic medieval world and also somewhat in the modern world is kind of like, oh, you are absolutely not to do this, not to do this. Psst, do it so no one sees you, or do it so it doesn't raise any social inquiry or
yeah,
social ire.
yes,
It's less about you not doing things and more about not doing it so it becomes dishonorable in the view of greatest society, or doing it in an open way.
Yeah, because here's another caveat.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Out of sight, out of mind. Because here's the thing: a virgin may not be married temporarily without a father's permission. So this is a condition: the father's permission. If the father permits, then this is actually valid. But says here it is reprehensible, but is it illegal? That's where the big little caveat comes in, like the legal terminology. It's reprehensible, but is it not halal, or is it haram or forbidden?
It doesn't seem to be forbidden from
exactly, because I think there's the condition like everything is permissible or everything is halal unless explicitly stated that it is forbidden. So, and also there's another condition, father, it is a condition that is required. It has to be, and in some cases, the condition can apply. Like, the father can permit this. So you never know.
Musa, this is actually a really good question as well, just considering like trafficking and such that's going on now in the Muslim world.
Can any male guardian be considered father in the absence of a father? So
I do think that the term that is usually used when it comes to marriage and is actually wali.
Wali, yes, the guardian.
Wali, I mean.
I think any guardian, yeah, it can be any male guardian actually, in the absence of a father. I'm not sure, and the thing is, the scam that's happening in Iraq, for example, the sex trade, the Muta trade, that is, we'll actually look into that as well too. So we'll see like what's happening in Iraq.
Wali, sorry, I mixed it up with Wali, which is governor.
Yeah. No worries,
I don't know why I did it. I just went.
Yeah, no worries. Now
I'm also trying to read something in Arabic at the same time. I'm trying to respond here, so I was just
yeah, I know it's a bit difficult because you have to kind of switch from like the Arabic to the English, and it's definitely
yeah.
The time period now we're gonna discuss Muda. Now, time period of a temporary marriage must be delineated in a manner which allows no possibility of increase or decrease. It has to be stipulated or has to be fixed. Interesting. According to Imam al-Rada, Muta must be stipulated thing for a stipulated period. In addition, the Imam was once tasked if it is possible to conclude a contact of Muta for 1 to 2 hours. He replied, wait, this is if it is when the Imam Raza Muta must be the Imam was once if it is possible to contract, the same Imam. Okay, I'm trying to see which Imam this is. Imam al-Rada. Contract of Muta for 1 to 2 hours. He replied, no time limit is understood from 1 to 2 hours. 1 or 2 hours. No time limit is understood from 1 or 2 hours. So does it have to be more than that? Like, this is a very vague answer. You know what I mean? Like, no time limit is understood from 1 or 2 hours. So it has to be specific, I'm guessing. According to Al-Sheikh Al-Ansari, all of the hadiths indicate that it is permissible for the agreed upon time period either to be joined to the moment of concluding the contract or be postponed. The situation here is the same as with the contract concluded for the purposes of rental, since as was appointed about the above woman takes on certain legal characteristics of rented property. Oh, Jesus Christ, this is gonna fuck, man. And why am I taking the name of Jesus? In the case of a temporary marriage, which begins after a period of postponement, there arises the question of whether or not the woman may marry a second man in the period between the conclusion of the contract and the beginning of the marriage period. Here are two possibilities that it is not permitted because woman is already has a husband, or that it is permitted because of the existence of all the requisites of a contract and the absence of an impediment. Apparently, the ruling here is that a second temporary marriage would be permissible provided that the woman has enough time before the beginning of the first marriage to conclude a second marriage and then observe her waiting period. So, wait, this is whether or not a woman may marry a second man in the period between the conclusion of a contract and so it's like between during the duration of her marriage, that is she allowed to do a second man? This is interesting. Here, guys, it is not permitted because the woman already has a husband, that is permitted because of the existence of all the requisites of a contract and that the absence of an impediment. Apparently, the ruling here is that a second temporary marriage would be permissible provided that the woman has enough time before the beginning of the first to conclude a second marriage and then to observe her waiting period. So I think can't be immediately, but she has to do the waiting period. She has to observe her waiting period. As for the possibility of postponing the beginning of Muta, this is conditional upon the stipulation of the day and month in which it is to begin. For example, if the man should state that the contract will be for 1 month but fail to stipulate exactly when that month is to begin, the contract is invalid because the time is not stated. So you have to state a time. In contracts of rental, such instances are always invalid. But if the contract should be unconditional, without any mention of a postponement, then the marriage begins as soon as the contract is concluded, since, according to the accepted standard, when a contract has concluded, the transaction has taken place. This is all very vague, very vague. This is some very weird legal, this is going to make even my legal professional like myself is getting a little confused here. The most authoritative view holds that if the stipulated period is not mentioned in the text of the contract, the marriage cannot take place and the contract is invalid. The consensus of the community has established that one of the two pillars that differentiate Muta from permanent marriage is to mention the time of the time period. Whenever this pillar is not present, everything that depends on it is invalidated. So this is a very big condition because we are saying it is a time limit. There is a time limit. In addition, a contract that follows the intentions of those who concluded. Thus, if the time period is not mentioned, the marriage cannot be transformed into a permanent one, since there was not the intention. In this connection, so you cannot turn a muta if there's no time period stated. You cannot turn it into a permanent marriage. In connection to this hadith has been related by Imam Jafar, there will be no muta without two things: a stipulated period and a stated dowry. So you need two things, like a stipulated period and a stated dowry. In spite of this opinion, a majority of the ulama hold that if the time period is not mentioned, the contract is not invalidated, which is interesting. Rather, the marriage becomes a permanent one. So this is the opposite view, which it becomes a permanent marriage. These scholars argue that a marriage contract is concluded either for temporary or permanent. If a time is mentioned, the contract is for a muta, but if it is not, the contract is for a permanent marriage. Hence, so this gets very interesting. Hence, whenever the contract of muta is invalidated because of time period has not yet been stipulated, the contract will be one of a permanent marriage. So you can accidentally turn your muta into a permanent marriage. Here they cite the principle of correctness in relation to the contract in order to corroborate their argument. They mention a hadith of Imam Jafar. If the time period is stated, the marriage is a muta. If it is not stated,
Moose, just want to mention, Akbar, if you can send that link in the Discord, I'll
yes,
also
yes.
show it on
I
the
actually saw
chat. This
this.
is really interesting.
Yeah. Apparently, there was a BBC documentary of the Muslim brothels in Iraq that had a cleric on hand to perform the needed ceremonies. Yeah, this happened. I actually was trying to find the link and I couldn't find it. Um, there is, this is Shia Iraq, by the way. This is Shia Iraq. So, you know, this gets very messed up. So, in opposition, that those who hold the temporary marriage is transformed into a permanent marriage, if the time period is not mentioned, Al Sheikh Al Ansari writes that temporary marriage and permanent marriage are two different realities, although the word marriage is employed for both. This does not make them share in the same nature. The difference between the two does not lie in saying that one is unconditional and the other is conditional. No, the real relationship between them is like that between purchasing something and receiving a gift. What? Purchasing something. So Muta is purchasing something or receiving a gift. Interesting. In both cases, ownership is result, but the fact that purchasing an object and receiving a gift have a common measure does not mean that they have the same nature. We cannot say that the only difference between the two is that receiving a gift entails unconditional ownership and purchasing entails ownership conditional on payment. No one would ever claim that when someone says, I have transferred ownership and forgets to mention a price, the purchase is immediately transformed into a gift. The relationship between temporary and permanent marriage is similar. Interesting. And Shar al-Ummah, Al-Shahid al-Thani adds that
I
the
can actually see this being an important point if it gets into an argument about, if the agreed upon dowry was not paid or something like that, and how to solve that.
Yeah, this could become a legal issue actually. If you think about it, this becomes a legal issue because if it's transformed into a permanent marriage or temporary, so this I can definitely see some court cases coming up that, oh, this was a permanent, no, this was a temporary marriage. So I can definitely see this coming up as a common form of legal dispute.
Speaking on court cases, Moose, I also sent you some court cases as well if you're interested.
Yes. I'll also show you like a what do you call it? Some court cases, but also like the Iraq stuff. So definitely we'll look into this as well too. So this is an interesting topic so far. So far, very interesting topic. Al-Shar al-Thani states that the hadith is quoted by Ja'far in support of the position that the majority of ulama does not state explicitly that desire of the two parties to the contract to conclude a marriage of a muta, but then they fail to mention the time period. On the contrary, the purpose of the hadith is that marriage with a state period is muta, while marriage without a stated period is a permanent marriage. There is no upper or lower limit to the duration of the time period. It makes no difference if the period is extremely long, so that one doubts whether the parties will survive its duration, or if it is extremely short. Very interesting. So that there is no possibility of consummation. In other words, any time period is permissible. Any time period. So even an hour is permissible. So long as both sides are aware of the situation and are satisfied. Once the contract is concluded, the wife receives the whole dowry, whether or not the husband consummates the marriage before the time period expires. The wife is entitled to the dowry as long as she places herself at her husband's disposal and does not present him with any obstacles to consummating the marriage. Yo, Nick, this sounds familiar, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The situation is exactly the same as renting a house. But when choosing not to take up residence before the rental period has expired, when the time period is over, the wife is freed from the obligations of the contract. Yes, go ahead.
This is a topic that drastic measures would say, but it wouldn't last 7 minutes. It would probably last like 4 or 3.
Janda can do positive things in Islam to an episode. Possibly last about 7 minutes. Oh, god damn it. quiet. Shut up. Shut up, guys.
I bet I actually could make a thing like that last for over an hour.
Bro, like, okay, calm down, all of you. Calm down. Calm down. I'm getting that stick. I'm getting that stick. Calm down, everybody. Calm down. All right. So, naughty, naughty. All of you, very, very naughty. All right.
Not as naughty as this subject matter, or as the comment section.
Yeah, I know. I don't blame you guys. I don't blame you guys, but I'm trying to maintain some intellectual discourse here.
I mean, this is. I mean, one thing I was thinking about is that this is actually becoming pretty dry. For our viewers, are you fine with him going through this entire legalese matter, or would you want us to discuss some other aspect of this, because we could shift it into some other aspect?
Yeah. I mean,
I have some things planned, for example.
We could like do the last point very quick. Oh, this is interesting. If the woman should die during the period of the muta, even before consummation, her dower may in no way be lessened, exactly as in a permanent marriage. Interesting. If the marriage has been consummated, so this is the dower basically. The contract must mention a dower of known property, whether in cash or kind, whose amount is safe from increase or decrease. So this has to be a fixed amount, that is. Also, in the previous thing, the role of the timer is to contain the stipulated number of sexual acts. Whether the number is finished, the woman is free from any further obligation. Okay. So you can state a number of sexual acts too. Interesting. Yeah, so whose amount, in order to gain knowledge of property, it is sufficient for the woman to see it, but it is not necessary that it actually be weighed, measured, or counted, whatever the case may require. Oh dear Lord. The contract of muta is not simply an exchange of goods, but a marriage. Even if it is defined as a rental, that also is different from an exchange. Oh boy. As for goods which are not present, that is sufficient for the dower, that the woman's ignorance will be removed. That is exactly how it's described. There is no condition or requirement concerning the amount of the dower, except that the two sides come to an agreement over articles which may properly be exchanged, even if there are no more than a few grains of wheat. Wow, that's the lowest you can go, a few grains of wheat. At this point, there are specified hadiths as well as general hadiths, which say that a woman who enters into a muta is rented. If the dower is not mentioned, the contract is unanimously held to be invalid. On this point, there's also a number of hadiths. Oh dear Lord. Oh dear Lord. A woman may ask for the whole amount of the dower at the beginning of the marriage. In this case, the man may not take back any dower under any circumstances, unless for some reason they contract that it should be invalid from the beginning. Several hadiths are recorded to establish this. Oh boy. But before the beginning, the man decides not to go through with the marriage, but to give back to the woman the contracted time. She's entitled to 1/2 of the dower. So if he doesn't decide to go through, so he still owes her half the money. The situation is similar to divorce before the consummation of a permanent marriage. Interesting. But if the man should give only part of the time period back to the woman before consummation, there's a difference on opinion of the dower. Yeah, this is some interesting stuff where the whole time period is given. Yeah, this is consummation, and there's a whole a lot of weird things. Like it's almost sounding like, overall I'll send you the link. This is the 4 pillars, by the way. Commands C. V. So this is, I've posted the link into the chat as well, so you guys can actually take a look into the whole conditions and stuff. So this is very
It's
Uh,
also even if this felt heavy, I'm sure that the Islamic judicial systems related to these are actually even more complex than this.
yes, this is a very it's this is just one subject within jurisprudence, mind you.
Yeah,
If
yeah, but I think that the laws and the regulations and the various traditions regarding these are actually a lot more than just the things that we've looked up.
yeah, keep in mind they were quoting
But
Islam.
might I begin to discuss what I wanted to do with
Yes,
the
yes,
background between Muta marriages and where it begins, kind of?
yes. Go
Because
ahead.
we actually have to go far before Islam in order to explain this.
Yeah.
Because Muta marriages isn't actually something that is unique to or similar concepts isn't actually something that is unique to Islam.
Hmm.
There's even back in old Semitic traditions, we are talking about Mesopotamian laws here, and also in South Semitic law systems, which are were systems used in what is modern day Yemen and Oman back far before, in antiquity and even during the early Iron Age. We do know that there did exist concepts of temporary marriages, and some of these were actually more or less a kind of like legalized sort of marriage that was usually used for
Prostitution.
yeah, and
Yeah.
also for having relationships outside of
Outside
marriage
of
but
marriage.
still
Yeah.
within marriage,
Yeah. Yeah.
because you wanted to have people written on a contract that we are doing it so that they then became responsible for any offspring afterwards, because this again is very important, that you are still responsible. This is actually a very important part in Semitic legal traditions generally. You, as long as you, it's actually, in this case, Jewish law is actually kind of an exception in that your bastard, on your children that aren't from a legal marriage isn't your children anymore.
Interesting.
This is a Yeah, this is actually something that is kind of different in other traditions, in that you are still responsible. If, for example, if you have I mean, if you have for example, intercourse with a slave in Islamic law, for example, and it results in a kid, that kid is still yours
Yeah.
and is now entitled to inheritance and the like.
Yes. Yes.
So you do have this tradition that is kind of like strong in on the Arabic Peninsula, because you see it in South Semitic law and you also see it up in the Mesopotamian region even before. So it's just more Jewish law that's a bit different here. But generally, you do have this idea that you want to have people responsible for any kids that result, and you want to do it and thus you extend this sort of legal protection by temporary marriage, in that
Yes.
you are no longer, gonna get either killed or punished for doing some illicit intercourse outside of the law, since this is lawful now. But you're
Yes.
also written up in a contract, or by witness, or you have witnesses that confirm this, like the parents or the like, which makes you responsible for anything that is produced from this
Mm.
relationship. Because again, it's important to have this connection.
Yes.
And
Yes.
there's also the fact that this isn't anything new, because this isn't anything new in Islam. So this goes back to, this was used in
Pre-Islamic
southern
time.
Semitic, but you also have it also outside of the Middle East. For example, the Romans had a
Yes.
second degree of what they didn't call marriage, but wasn't actually sexual intercourse with slaves as well, or either. Do you know what they called the status of a woman that were in a limited marriage?
What was their status?
Either concubinatus.
Oh, concubinatus. This is where the term concubine comes from.
Yes, it was a limited
Oh.
marriage. That
Oh.
was it was either it was either temporalis, limited in time, or it was limited in limes, or in rights you had associated with it, because you had two types of it.
Yeah.
Usually, so it wasn't just one thing; it was two things, but that they also kind of mixed at times.
Oh,
Remember, Roman
right.
law is the same thing through the entire Republican time and the entire imperial time. It changes as well,
Yes.
because we are talking about several hundreds of years. So, for example, in the beginning, it was kind of like it was a secondary. For example, Roman law actually allowed polygamy in the beginning, and then it didn't in the end. And it actually first it was actually forbidding polygamy, then it allowed it, then
Yeah.
banned it again. So it kind of like
Interesting.
went back and forth.
Very back and forth.
But
Yeah.
yeah. So it wasn't a straight line either when it comes to this. And this is actually a part of it, because people were discussing whether concubinatus marriage actually was considered marriage, because it wasn't considered marriage proper in law, but it still
Yeah.
had the same function as it.
Yeah.
So there was this entire legal. There is actually, sources about legal discussions about this, about
Right.
if it is proper to have a real wife and a concubina, a
Yes.
concubine.
Also,
So if
Also, by the
that
way-
was considered polygamy or not.
yeah. Also, by the way, Drastic, he just posted the link. This is the trade documentary, by the way. I highly recommend watching this. So if anything, it'll definitely be a very interesting, and I would also give content warning, disturbing in many aspects. By the way, this is
but I wanted to continue a bit, if it's
yeah.
And the
go
thing
ahead.
with this concubinage, or this secondary wife thing, is that it is actually very similar to how Muta is used. It is pretty much the same thing, but only with different rules applied to it. I mean, for example, prostitutes that did prostitution in free women that did prostitution, because there were other rules for prostitutes that were prostitutes and not free women. They could be forced to have sex in the ancient Roman world. But if you were a free woman doing prostitution, then you had to enter into a limited concubinatus status.
Really?
Yes.
So wait, if you were a free woman, not a slave woman, that is.
Yes.
You had to enter into concubinage, but on a limited time.
Yes.
Wow. I did not know this. Was this common in the Rome, or elsewhere, like in the Middle East as well, or in other places?
In Roman law did extend for any Roman citizen outside of the empire as well, and concubinatus still remained up to. I mean, it became less used in the imperial time, especially kind of like. Eventually, even Diocletian banned it, if I'm not entirely wrong. So he in the third century. So that it eventually disappeared and then even got banned. But before that, it did exist. So it was probably used outside of just main Italy.
Yeah, I'm guessing it may have been also very controversial back then too.
Yeah, I mean, it was also kind of one of the controversies, actually, was that there existed proper marriage that could be with manus or without the hand. Manus is hand. This has to do with the how you give the responsibility of patria potestas, which is the power of the father, and how it's transferred to the husband or like. And this created a lot of issues, legal issues in the Middle Republic. So actually, what happened was a lot of people actually entered into concubinatus, because here this wasn't a legal issue, and then just acted like normal husbands and wives.
Wow.
But it wasn't a limited time limited concubinatus. That was a limited in terms of rights and obligations, because it went both ways, actually. Which actually, ironically enough, in these periods, it was actually better for the woman to enter into concubinatus because she was more protected by that way than by being a proper wife. She still retained more rights because the husband did not have as many rights over her as in a proper marriage.
Right, because the proper marriage itself would have been more restrictive in many aspects.
Yeah, because, for example, in a concubinatus marriage, the husband couldn't kill his wife
What?
legally.
What? So wait, you could not kill your wife, but you can kill your wife if it's a permanent marriage?
Yes, it wasn't a temporary marriage because this was usually not time limited concubinage.
Right,
But
right.
but as long as but even a limited one, you couldn't kill them because concubinatus implied that you do not receive the full power of being patria potestas, the father of the house, the power of the father of the household over her.
This makes it very oh boy, this gets I can definitely see like the legal, it gives more legal protection if anything. So I can kind of see why women would resort to something like this.
So it was viewed as something that wasn't a true marriage because it wasn't, you didn't get the status of your husband like you did in a true marriage, because status, what I'm talking about here isn't just social status. What I'm talking about here is actually caste status, or class status, which is kind of like you became the same type of class or the same type of citizen as your husband. That didn't happen with concubinage or concubinatus.
Yeah, okay.
And that was one thing that you lost out on. But on the other hand, if you, for example, were of the same class background and had the same status anyway, and it wouldn't change, then it was also a way of ensuring that you wouldn't get, as a woman, if your father didn't want you to, didn't trust entirely your soon to be husband and he wanted to protect you, then he forced her, or rather said, you will get into a relationship with her through concubinatus rather than through manus matrimonia, which is marriage of by the hand.
This gets very fascinating.
And I can see in Islamic law, actually, when I looked into it, that there are similarities in that you actually do have certain more rights as a woman. So I wonder if, since these temporary marriages need to have a defined period of time, you could theoretically actually push for it to be for a lifetime. So there could exist those aspects into this also.
Well, keep in mind, Janine, what we've read so far in the legal requirement, there's no minimum or maximum period at all.
No, I said that, and I can see if there are some other sort of laws or regulations that make it into an alternative for various reasons. It could have been used as that. Yeah. And because that was what happened in the Roman
society,
Yeah, and the thing with marriage in in the Roman world, when you had these various degrees, because that meant it kind of like this temporary, it wasn't marriage for Romans, but this temporary legal relationship that became pretty much equivalent to marriage still had a function as kind of like a secondary way of marriage.
Yeah, no, this in itself, like, it's this gets very fascinating, and I feel like the Islamic world could have adapted a little bit from the Romans as well too, and sort of give it a massage it is and give it their own flavor. I can definitely see that happening.
But at least in Islamic law, you do not have the right as a husband to kill your wife for any reason.
Like, of course, domestic violence is still permitted. Yes. And also these legal temporary counters really go against the whole honor thing for women. It's bizarre. Yeah, it does like throw the honor culture on its head pretty much. So this was where it gets interesting. But anyway, we have to get back to the main topic.
You have to remember that a lot of these things, Romans also cared about chastity, or our view of chastity, of not getting access to other women. But they did have kind of like concubinatus was also a way of doing it in a way that was socially acceptable, and Muta marriages are also the same in the Arabic world.
It's socially acceptable or religiously acceptable, in however you want to define it.
Yeah, and I also imagine, I mean, nowadays people are beginning to look down upon this very heavily, but I don't think that was the case in the past.
It's like I said, Ginny, it's complicated, but also we're going to see why it's going to be looked down upon, because it's become a front for not just prostitution, Ginny, child prostitution.
Yeah.
And keep in mind, there was no minimum age of marriage either. So children could be forced into this as well, too. And this lends itself to a lot of abuse. So this, by the way, this is a readable version of the BBC documentary. I think I can't watch the BBC documentary because for copyright reasons, but I did post the link. But BBC investigation exposes Shia clerics in Baghdad advising men on how to abuse girls. So this is, I'm walking through the security cordon that leads into Kazimiya. By the way, Kazimiya is in Baghdad. And Kazimiya is like a small town within Baghdad district where Musa Kazim is buried. So Musa Kazim is the seventh Imam, the son of Jafar al-Sadiq. One of the holiest Shia Islam sites. I'm in queue along with a dozen of pilgrims who've come all over the world to pay their respects to the shrine of Imam Kazim. At the gate, a female security guard pats me down and looks me into my handbag. A reminder that the story I'm reporting here isn't going to be easy. As I walk through around the market stalls surrounding the shrine, I notice the many marriage offices dotted around the mosque, which are licensed to perform Sharia marriages. I had received tips that some clerics here were performing short-term muta, or pleasure marriages, a practice illegal under Iraqi law, by the way, illegal under Iraqi law, whereby men can pay for a temporary wife, with the officiating cleric receiving a cut. This is where the abuse comes in. The cleric is receiving a cut. I was told that behind closed doors, many of these clerics were using and abusing Sharia marriage laws to exploit women for profit. These men were grooming vulnerable girls and young women, trapping them into prostitution and pimping them out, all with seemingly total impunity. Like, there's no consequences for these fuckers. Sorry, I'm going to swear a bit too. For such a story, we need to secure evidence on camera. We recruited a male undercover reporter who, over the course of a year-long investigation, met and secretly filmed several clerics running the Sharia marriage offices in the vicinity of the shrines. Meanwhile, I met and interviewed the clerics' female victims, as well as some of the male clients who routinely used pleasure marriage. First, our undercover reporter approached a number of clerics with the marriage offices near the shrine of Qadimiyya in Baghdad to gauge how many were willing to perform Mutamir ceremonies. Out of the 10 clerics that were approached, 8 agreed to arrange a pleasure marriage for our reporter. They said, you can marry a girl for half an hour, and as soon as it's over, you can marry another. Holy fuck. One of the clerics, Sayyid Rad, told the reporter on camera, even after half an hour, you can marry another, he repeats. We also caught on camera evidence supporting some of the victims' claims that the clerics often conspired with their male clients to deceive women. In Academia marriage office, our reporter, posing as a visiting businessman, was advised by the cleric to use deception when planning a pleasure marriage. He says, "Take my advice. Don't tell her where my offices are in Academia, so afterwards she can't come looking for her rights. Trust me, it's better that way." Wow. We found that teenage girls were particularly vulnerable to predatory men assisted by clerics, often paying the heaviest of prices for their misfortune. In Iraq, for a young girl to lose her virginity outside of marriage is widely seen as a scandal, bringing shame on her family and tainting its honor. Such girls are often disowned and shunned by their families. In some cases, the girls are murdered. In Ghazmia, Sayyid Rad offered to officiate pleasure marriage between our reported and a young virgin. He advised him not to take her virginity during their time together, adding that anal sex is permitted. Fuck. If I do take a virginity, God forbid, what do I do? Our reporter inquired. Do her family know where you live? Sayyid Rad asked. He's like, no, they don't. Our reporter, then you can just leave, the cleric declared. What the fuck, man? What the fuck? Watching the secret footage was difficult, especially as I was interviewing many young women who were living with the consequences of the cleric's actions. One of them, Mona, was just 14 when an older man started following her home from school. He told me he was rich and he loved my personality and that I was beautiful. A few weeks later, a man introduced her to a cleric and pressured her into entering a pleasure marriage. I informed the cleric I was virgin, Mona told me, but the cleric didn't ask her for her parents' consent, as it is the custom in Iraq, saying it wasn't needed as both she and the man were adults. Wow. Well, then again, 9-year-old is considered like fucking adult. Now, 17, she is under pressure from her family to marry, but is terrified her future husband will find out she's no longer a virgin. Her uncle, she tells me, killed her cousin merely for having a boyfriend. Now she keeps thinking about suicide. I have no way out. If I feel more pressure, I will do it. Again, I'll give a trigger warning, guys. I should have given a trigger warning. I'm so sorry. I should have given a trigger warning. This shit is fucked up. This is fucked up shit that I'm going to be talking about. The investigation took me to Karbala. Karbala is where Hussein is buried, the holiest site. An important part of our investigation was to establish the role of the holy city's religious authorities in all this, particularly whether they condone the practice of pleasure marriage. At the main marriage office, I spoke to Sheikh Imad al-Asadi, who insisted the practice was illegal. But around the corner from the office, we found another cleric who was willing to officiate a pleasure marriage to a child, including giving explicit instructions to how to sexually abuse children without getting caught. This cleric was clearly not only one taking part in such abuses. Another of the women I spoke to, Reem, accused prominent clerics of being involved in pimping and pleasure marriages. After Reem's husband was killed by an ISIS bomb in 2016, she and her 2 children became homeless. Reem said that when she approached a well-known cleric for alms, he had sex with her and pimped her out to his friends. Reem doesn't name the cleric, but describes him as powerful and well-known in her community. Yikes. He proposed a pleasure marriage with me. I had to do it to survive, she said. They would have sex once or twice a week in his office. Then he began bringing his friends, including one who Reem says was famous in the region. He forced me to go into a room with his friend. Reem then found out that the cleric was charging his associates $300 or $400 to have sex with her, while she was paid just pocket money. They were like animals, she said. They have sex with a woman, then throw her away. Fuck, this is disturbing. But how are clerics able to get away with breaking the law so blatantly? The strength of the Shia establishment, religious, backed by intimidatory weight of armed Shia militias, appears to have given Shia clerics a sense of total impunity. Our investigation has found many of the clerics who enjoy powerful political connections. One of them, Karbala-based Sayyid Salabi, boasted to our reporter that he was attached to a Shia militia, a claim which has been given credence by photographic evidence we found on social media. The BBC later approached the clerics for their response. Sayyid Rad denied he performed Muta marriages. Others did not respond. Sayyid Rad then said that he was a grand follower of the Grand Ayatollah Ali Sistani, Iraq's most influential Shia cleric. By the way, I've also read a lot on Ayatollah Ali Sistani's laws and stuff. The BBC then approached Ayatollah Sistani's office in Najaf. This is where Ali ibn Abu Talib is buried, by the way, with the reporter's evidence, and asked him to clarify his stance on Muta marriages. He says, if these practices are happening in any way, you are saying that we condemn them unreservedly, his office said. Temporary marriage is not allowed as a tool to sell sex in a way that belittles the dignity and humanity of women. A guardian of girls should not permit her marriage without her consent, and she is not supposed to marry if it's against law, which could bring troubles to her. I mentioned in one of the conditions is that her father's permission, and that how they said it was impossible. But look, this shit is still happening. Like other Shia leaders, 89-year-old Ayatollah has previously, in a book published 25 years ago, The Righteous, written that if a child were under 9, were a promise to temporary marriage, sexual touching was still religiously permitted. And I've also read this in one of his laws online too. And this was also mentioned by Ayatollah al-Khomeini as well too, or I think it was Ruhollah al-Khomeini or something, from Iran. The Ayatollah's office told the BBC Times had changed and that had been erased from current books. Sure, buddy, sure. This investigation showed how the hardships of post-conflict Iraq and the rise of Shia religious conservative establishment have turned the clock back on women's rights. Secular laws designed to protect women and children have been part of the Iraqi legal system for decades, but they have been rendered meaningless in the face of continuous flouting by powerful men backed by the country's religious and political establishment. Meanwhile, a whole generation of young girls and women are paying a devastating price. As Reem puts it, describing the cleric's abuser, they eat the flesh and throw the bones away. So, my apologies. I should have given the trigger warning. Sistani talked about dying. Also did Khomeini as well from Iran. And This stuff is. I recently went to Iraq as well in my travels. I know I don't know how to read Arabic, so I probably couldn't find these offices. But I didn't go out actively looking for them because I didn't want to get myself into trouble. But yeah, there's a lot of hypocrisy. I'm not gonna lie, it's fucking hypocrisy because some of the guys had a problem with me wearing a tank top inside my room, but then had a problem, but they don't have a problem with this shit. This is where the hypocrisy comes in. And it is these parts of Iraq are very, very heavily influenced by Shia clerics, Shia Maulvis. Shia clerics or Maulvis or scholars have a lot of control over your visa process. So there's a lot of legal control as well. So the way the system's set up, it is rife for abuse. And this is big business too. Like the pilgrimage is big business. So I don't see this shit dying down anytime soon. There needs to be some form of heavy-handed secular government. Only that can actually interfere with this nonsense. But anyway, my apologies for the topic. It's a heavy topic, and I think Nick or Seitan.
Yes.
I know it's those poor girls. Awful. This is fucked up. Not awful stuff. Awful stuff is this shit is fucked up. So I'm not going to hold my punches here. Nick also sent me a.
Might I go into something that is still also as heft up as this?
Yeah, go
For
ahead.
sure, go ahead.
First, I would also just say that I'm very tired today, so I will also try to excuse myself for having once again messed up with another language, Latin, that I know that I should not be this bad at, which is that matrimonia is the status of being a legal wife in in Latin, and connubium is marriage in Latin. I mixed them up
Yeah,
when I
not
was
a problem.
speaking.
Yeah, not a problem.
Sorry, I had a late night. Last night. Anyway, uh, I would also want to say that these issues haven't only occurred in Iraq. They've also occurred in the Western world with certain Shia minorities,
Yes.
areas dominated by Shia minorities, where this kind of prostitution
Yes.
has occurred
Yeah.
because some
This needs
have
to be
done it, and it has kind of been, despite the fact that the laws of the land say that, for example, in Sweden, prostitution is illegal.
Mhm.
And there was this last year. There was this, or was it last year, or was it 2 years ago, or at least a couple of years? I mean, a time ago, there was this big scandal in Sweden about
Yes.
people that had organized these sort of Muta marriages in exchange for money, and that went against the law of prostitution, and that resulted in scandals and uproars in Swedish media, and then also it resulted in a lot of uproars on the other hand and among Shia communities that thought that this was being Islamophobic against them, and yeah, it went
Yeah,
into a
they're gonna
total
play that. They're gonna play that
mess.
card. They're gonna play that card, and I want to be there, and I want to be as public as possible about this like nonsense and say no, you don't get to play that fucking card again. I want to. This is why we're doing videos like this to say like no, you don't get to do this shit. Like you don't get to play the victim. You are the perpetrator. And yeah, I think Ginny, you are. They in Sweden especially, they're gonna play that card because there's this rumor that the Swedish government is Islamophobic. I'm not mistaken. That is.
Yeah, I mean, it has ever since the Quran burnings and
Yeah.
that entire mess. That has, and also the even before that, you had the thing about the child protection services in Sweden taking
Yeah.
several children from some Muslim families. That, by the way, these taking of the custody of the children was due to court processes, which are
Yes.
entirely open, by the way.
Yes. And
And
these court processes.
after having looked into them, with one of the women that were very highly vocal in it, she had several accounts of fraud
Right.
and
Yes.
other stuff related to her resume of things that were cited against her keeping custody. And
Yes.
the only case that was kind of like in a gray zone was kind of like there was one kid that had gotten I wouldn't say it was a beating, but it was very light, stuff like a
Right.
slap. But it had been in the entire openness, where everyone had seen it. So thus he lost custody.
Yes.
And
Yes. And I think there was a whole story I remember, Ginny. It's like, oh, they're forcing kids and taking them away. But when you actually looked into the story, a lot of Muslims themselves said, no, this is open court process. There were issues that the state
yes,
had to interfere in this situation. So it is justified by the Swedish court to interfere in these matters of child custody. So and I remember in Instagram and TikTok, it was spreading like wildfire. This misinformation that the Swedish government is evil or satanic or something like that, and it's like no, this was not the case. Like so,
Believe me, I remember looking at Arabic Twitter at that time, and it was hell.
yeah, and I feel like it's like they're trying to paint Sweden as like the new France, and I'm like, no, it's not it's not the case at all. Like it's just like this whole story. Yeah, and I said basically they were clerics are running like a grooming gang, and we were trying to get this message out there, and we have to confront hard truths.
I mean, the problem is that this is financially incentivized for these clerics to act like this. It's kind of a way to get money.
Yes, and also this is a way to also cover
they only
up.
care about God's laws, Bodrio. No, in this case, I think it's more the case that they only care about the money.
Yeah, I feel like,
and they use God's laws to get money.
Yeah, they use God's laws to get the money. It's the business they take care of.
This kind of business model, if I should go back into history, is actually not that unique to Islam either. You do know that the temples in Mesopotamia had also sacred prostitution.
I remember reading about this.
Yeah, so they had prostitution connected to their sacred, temple complexes and their.
Because I remember the Epic of Gilgamesh, where Enkidu, when he enters a temple or holy area, he's taken in by a harlot. The harlot is a priestess, actually.
Yes.
So she, in essence, the harlot was kind of like a holy form of sex worker of sorts.
Yes.
And she was the one who guided him with life, gave him some love, and all that stuff. So it was fascinating, but also weirdly fucked up.
I mean, it was a way to get money.
Yeah, I wouldn't be fucking surprised.
For the temples. I mean, it's the same. It's just that they were polytheistic, and Islam is strictly monotheistic. The fundamental idea about you having some sort of clerical control over prostitution, legalized prostitution, is not something new.
Yeah, it's not unique to monotheism or Islam, but it's definitely existed for sure.
I mean, it's kind of interesting though that it is in Iraq, the main part of Mesopotamia, that these practices are still.
This is like history repeating itself. Holy shit!
Repeating or continuing. I'm wondering how, because I don't think that these traditions must have necessarily disappeared. It could be that these are just continuations.
Fuck yeah! I know Nick sent
but
me...
by other name. You do know how Christianity continued a lot of practices in Europe. And they became called Christian, but they weren't really Christian. They were older practices that they were now given a Christian name and rationale for doing.
Yeah, especially in like
the same thing also probably happened with Islam a lot.
Yeah, especially a lot of Celtic laws, or Celtic traditions that continued even after Christianity. I remember reading about, and even some English practices. But anyway. I just wanted to quickly go over this. I think Nick sent this to me. This is where I see the old laws clashing with relatively contemporary laws. This is not modern per se. This is a case from 1882 in Calcutta. This was British India. By the way, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Burma, and Sri Lanka were under the British Empire at this time. So this is where this case took place.
Back in the time when the sun never
set on the British Empire.
Never set. Yes.
This is the time when the sun never set in the British Empire. So
yeah,
this is a case by looked over by judgment.
Now I mixed up, and I was about to say the time when the sun never dawned, but that was kind of like that.
God
That
damn
has
it,
bad
Jimmy.
connotation.
I'm never wrong.
Sorry, I'm kind of tired. It's just that I sometimes do these messes.
Yeah.
I mean, again, English isn't either my mother tongue, and when I'm trying to go through 3 different languages,
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. But I'll give you that, Jimmy. You are a smart man, and you have 3 different languages. So good on you. Pat yourself on the back. And by the way, in this judgment is by McDonald and Field JJ. The petitioner case made an application under Section 536 of the Code of Criminal Procedure for the purpose of obtaining an order or maintenance of herself as the wife of Prince Mirza Kamar Kudar. So this is, by the way, it is admitted on all hands the parties are Shias. I love how they spell Shias as S-H-E-E. And that she was a wife by Muta form of marriage contract. She alleges that the period of the contract made between herself and the defendant was 50 years. See, Jimmy, I told you, I was telling you, this could last a while. The defendant, on the other hand, alleges that the period was 1.5 months only. Interesting. Oh boy. I really feel like they had to get a lot of education on this, and they were probably rubbing their heads. The deputy magistrate before the case came for disposal was opinion first that, inasmuch under the Shia law, Muta wife has no right to maintenance. The petitioner was not entitled to obtain an order for maintenance under the provisions of the code. And secondly, that as the defendant had given up the remaining term period of the Muta marriage, the petitioner was no longer a wife in the meaning of Section 536. As to the first point, there is no dispute that according to Shia law, a Muta wife is not entitled to maintenance. But it is contended by Mr. Amir Ali that the provision of Shia law cannot interfere with the statutory right to maintain maintenance given by Section 536. We think that this contention is correct. So the right to maintenance, depending on potential personal law of individual, is a right capable of being enforced and properly forms of subject of the civil suit. But we think that this right, depending on the personal law of the individual, is altogether different from the statutory maintenance given by Section 536 in every case in which a person having sufficient means neglects, refuses, or to maintain his wife. As to the point, it is admitted by both sides that the husband can give up the remaining portion of the period for which the contract of the Muta marriage is made. For the defendant, it is contended that the effect of giving up the rest of the period is to put an end to the relationship of husband-wife. No authority has been shown to us in support of this contention, and as a present of advice, we are unable to concur the argument that the giving up of the remainder of the term terminates the relationship of husband and wife. According to Shia law, Muta form marriage does not admit repudiation, and if the giving up of the remainder of the term had the effect contended for, this would practically destroy the provision of law which forbids repudiation in this form of marriage. We think, therefore, the deputy magistrate was not right in dismissing the petition on either of the grounds on which he has proceeded. We must therefore set aside his order and remain the case in order that it may determine whether the period of the Muta contract was 50 years as alleged by the petitioner, or 1.5 as only alleged by the defendant, determine, in other words, whether the petitioner is still wife of the defendant. In the course of the argument, question was raised, upon which we pronounced no opinion, because it was not a point that was raised by the deputy magistrate. We refer to the question whether the form of divorce known as zihad may be exercised in the Muta form of marriage. Mr. Bailey says that there is some difference in opinion on that point, but that, according to the opinion, which is founded in traditional authority, may be exercised that the defendant contended before the deputy that he had given up the remainder of the term, and that this had the effect of terminating the relationship of a husband and wife. He made no allegation that he had exercised a right to exercise zihad. By the way, is there a rest of the case? Nick?
I think I can get the case documents itself from India, but
it seems like more of a summary, but I'm not sure what the decision was. Okay, this is a judgment. Maintenance, Kamar is admitted, all parties are Shia, she has a wife. One second. Let me just search this up actually. Ludun Sahiba versus Mirza Kumar. Ludun Sahiba versus Mirza Kumar decision. I just want to see the decision. Like, and by the way, this applies to Indian law too. I'm just looking 1 second with him. Case laws. Oh, so it's kind of like recognizing the Muta marriage. That's what the case law is basically. 1 second, let me show you. Like, I found another link that is Muta marriage, although a temporary form of marriage. So this is from the Indian Lawyers Club, basically, which is an Arabic word which means especially pre-Islamic, especially being a pre-Islam. So they acknowledge it's a pre-Islamic practice. So it's now banned by the Sunnis, but the Muta marriage is noted to be a temporary agreement. This type of marriage is probably seen as prostitution by Sunni Muslims and consequently is not approved by Sunni, but it is considered legitimate in the 12-verse sect, which is predominant in Iran. And Ashari returns the cohabitation. Children of marriage are legitimate. The Muta husband and wife have no mutual rights of inheritance. Muta wife is entitled to a full dowry even if the husband does not end up cohabiting. Muta wife is not entitled to any maintenance from the husband, although she is definitely entitled to claim maintenance under criminal procedure. So she is entitled to this maintenance. One terms of the consummation, it does, blah, blah, blah. There is no requirement for divorce, either by death of party, expiry of period, or husband leaves the wife before the expiry term. This is interesting. Even if the husband leaves the wife, in terms where the husband leaves the wife before, it is mentioned that he had made a gift of unexpired period in favor of the wife, because in this case, he must pay the full amount of the dower. If wife leaves, as mentioned, her dower is deduced in proportion to the remaining time. So, yeah, this gets very confusing. On the similar ground, the inheritance. So this did cause some inheritance issues.
By the way, I looked up a thing, by the way.
Yes.
We have to clarify a thing here when it comes to Muta.
Yeah.
And or Nikah or Mutati. It's only allowed in clearly allowed in 12er Shia Islam.
This is something
there seems to be some discussion about it in Zaydi Islam, where some say that it's not allowed, some say it is allowed. In Ismaili Shia Islam, it is forbidden because one of the early imams before the split off in all of the various Shia Ismaili branches forbade it.
Yes.
So it's kind of like it's only in maybe some Zaydi groups and in 12er Shia where it's allowed. These are subgroups of Shia that are, the 12ers are the ones that are most predominant in Iran and Iraq. Zaydis are those that are most predominant in Yemen and, Southern Arabia generally. And the Ismailis are all over the place, but they are a smaller group.
Yeah, and also this is a very interesting conclusion by the Indian lawyers, that is. In conclusion, we must take to note that motions of Muta marriage can be seen evidently in our country. They mentioned India. Taking India into consideration, temporary marriage is not recognized particularly, although there exist few who contract Muta marriage, but such marriages are not enforceable in court of law. To give an instance, Hyderabad is considered the epicenter of the practice where marriage can be instituted for a time span as 1 or 2 days. Hyderabad has a lot of
I'm from there, and I can tell you that if you go to some places in Old City, yeah, it's
Yeah,
pretty
there's a
much like
lot of
that.
Shia
All the
Muslims
hookers.
in Hyderabad, yes. Take, for example, Hyderabad case. It was held at the court. There's no difference between muta for an unspecified period and muta for life. A permanent nikah marriage can be contracted by use of muta, specification of the period for which muta marriage is contracted. Taking note that this practice, temporary muta, is widespread in modern times and often arranged by imams and other Islamic leaders in Europe, America, Shias of Dearborn and Michigan, and in the Middle East. I think you were mentioning Dearborn, Nick. It is very commonly seen in the cases of destitute widows and orphan girls that are within the clutches of temporary marriages, were often sold to old men. The sad plight for the women is that there is no desire or pleasure that drives them into such misery. It is actually the extreme means to pay the rent and feed themselves and their children that pushes them into such marriages. Consequently, due to this kinds of arrangements, we have widespread criticism by various as it implied encouraging legalization of prostitution. So I'm also glad that the Indian lawyers are also being pretty fairly open about this. About this reality. And I feel like this should be more and more looked into, and I've seen a lot of Shia Muslims say, oh, this is just propaganda and used to make Shias look bad or made to look Iran look bad and the Ayatollahs look bad. And like, shut the fuck up. That's my response. Shut the fuck up.
I mean, it isn't even all the Shia that agree that this should be allowed. As I said before, it's only it's only certain traditions within the 12er Shia branch that are clearly in favor of this. The Zaydis are are also ambiguous, and the Ismailis say no, this shouldn't be allowed.
Yes. So Ismaili
and considering how many sects you have in Ismaili Shia Islam with all of these subdivisions, that they can agree upon this because it happened so early at least tells you something about that view.
Yeah, and also like with Ismaili Shia having multiple, like many different branches, this shit gets complicated.
Yeah, no. It's the opposite, since this actually happened that early before the various splits.
Oh, really?
Yes.
So, like, you're saying, like, I know Ismaili split earlier. Very early.
Yeah, they split off, but the Ismailis have later split off into various Boras and the various other subgroups. But before that, before all of these other subgroups, they did have, they have the imams in common, the righteous caliphs in common, and they did, and one of them forbade it.
Interesting, very interesting. They forbade muta marriage. Interesting, very interesting. So it goes to show that even back then, this was seen as like,
I mean, the Sunnis forbade this as well, remember?
Yes.
So it wasn't like this was, something that was entirely, people realized that this was problematic from a pretty early time.
Yes, absolutely. But anyway, we are past the 2-hour mark. Holy crap, this was a heavy topic, and we passed the 2-hour mark by 8 minutes. Satan, from the Devil Worshipper, do you have any last words?
Yeah, no, the two cases I presented, if it leaks onto next week, I think the second case is also really interesting.
Yeah.
But
yeah, we'll have to look into other legal cases I just want to see like what the conclusion of the cases is, because sometimes like they write in that older English language. It's like, what the fuck are you writing? Like gibberish. So I wanted to be able to at least translate it for the audience. Yeah, I know, even legal language can be like, very weird. But definitely for next week or the week after, we'll see if we're doing an episode, and we'll cover topics like this. And Jimmy, do you have any last words?
Not that much. More than that, temporary marriage has a long history that goes even before Islam, and it is not practiced in most groups within Islam. It's only more or less the 12er
Yeah.
Shia and some radical Zaydi branches that does this. But in the 12er Shia, they are kind of one of the main line branches, and in Zaydi, it's not the main line. It's kind of like one group with the three.
Yeah. And
groups.
and I personally feel that we need to talk about this shit. We need to kind of like, point, if, because a lot of times Sunni Islam gets criticism, right? Majority of the time.
Yes, I mean, it is the mainstream type of Islam, so
yes, and this
it's
is
understandable that
it does need a little, like, exposure. We have to confront these truths, and we have to confront what's happening in Iraq and even places like we mentioned, Dearborn, Michigan, like, some form of like grooming in other parts of the world without the legal system knowing. So we have to address these truths. Anyway, thank you, everybody. Thank you, you two little demons, for joining us. Thank you, all you heathens, for joining us in this week's of Gin and Tonic Show.
And we'll see you in Discord.
I won't be on Discord, but Ginny, you have to sleep. Go to sleep. And
I'll be in Discord, like the good Satan.
Satan will be in Discord if you want to talk to him. I will be just, heading out, and I'll chat with you guys later. All right, take care, everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye.